Hello and welcome back to the channel. As promised today, I'll be showing you how to paint Black Templar Tabbards, including freehand keyline. In this video, I will be using the official Eavy Metal recipes to do this. First of all, I'm going to base coat the whole tabard with a mix of 2:1 Wraithbone and Rakarth flesh. For consistency here, I decided to make a mix. It takes me a few coats to get a smooth coverage of the tabard. Be patient and take your time with this, as a smooth base coat is one of the most important parts, especially with pale colours that will show imperfections more easily. I like to do fast thin coats and allow plenty of time to dry before applying the next coat. As soon as I have a smooth base coat here, I'm going straight on to do the freehand keyline using Khorne red. I consider freehand to be one of my weaker points as a painter, so doing freehand directly over the base coat like this allows me to cut back into it and tidy up any mistakes. I continue to run the line around the outer edges of the tabard, trying to keep a consistent width and distance from the edge, and tidying it where necessary. Here we have the completed line. You can either leave it like this or go on to embellish it with a more intricate design, as I choose to do here. I carefully mark the center point of the line and start to work on a half cross pattern. I find it often helps when doing freehand patterns to break it down into the simplest shapes first, then cut back into them. A good example of simplifying seemingly complex designs is the pattern I did on Castellan Crow's cloak. As you can see here, it can be broken down as follows. First, I painted a simple keyline. This was followed by a triangle pattern along the length of the keyline. After this, I cut back into the base of the triangle with an ellipse, leaving us with a regular spike pattern. Using the same method here, I broke the pattern down into simple triangular shapes, which then I cut back into to form the familiar chapter icon. After that's done, I make a mark at roughly the midpoint between the center of the icon and the left edge of the cloth. At this point, I make a triangle spike. Next, I continue the pattern with quarter crosses to complete the corners of the design. Now that the bottom line is done, it becomes much easier to work out the sides of the design. I continue painting the pattern, carefully judging by eye where to make the next mark and adjusting it where necessary. Now that the keyline is done, it's time to start shading the cloth. I do this first by adding a soft shade of Karak stone. I glaze this into all the recessed areas of the tabard. I like to use a glazing medium, especially when working with lighter colours like this, as I find it really helps with the coverage and reduces the chalky finish. My preferred product to use is De La Rowney Matte Glaze Medium, as it's the most consistent finish. It's also super useful for matting down things like transfers. Now it's time for the next shade. For this, I'll be using XV88. Using this, I continue to deepen the shading. At first, I'm mixing some in with the Karak stone to create a softer shade. Lastly, I use the deepest shade, which is a mix of XV88 and Rhinox hide. Only use this where you really want to push the contrast in the areas of deepest shadow. As you can see now, with all the shading, the tabard was starting to look a little bit untidy, so I decided to go back with the base coat and smooth out the transitions. Next up is the first highlight stage of Wraithbone. I carefully glaze this onto the raised areas towards the top of his stomach and along the folds of the cloth. After that's done, I add white to the Wraithbone until I have a roughly 1:1 mix. I use this to brighten the highlights even more towards the most extreme folds of the cloth, followed by a highlight of pure white towards the edges of the tabard. Finally, all there is left to do now is to tidy and sharpen any of the freehand that was affected by the previous stages. Thank you for taking the time to watch part 2 of how to paint a Black Templar. If you are interested in any of the other elements of this miniature, including leather, shield, metallics and basing, I will be uploading them for early access to Patreon in the next few days. A massive thank you to all the new supporters. Catch you all next time.